All right, first graders, today we're going to read chapter 3 of Frog and Toad Are Friends. Now, today, after you're finished reading, I'm going to ask you to describe either frog or toad. That's going to be your writing assignment today. So while you're listening, be thinking, what do you notice frog or toad say? And what do you notice them doing? Because that tells us what they're like on the inside. A character trait describes someone on the inside. We could say they're nice, mean, caring, helpful. There's so many words we can use to describe people on the inside. Let's read and notice what Frog and Toad say and do to learn and be able to describe them on the inside. All right. We're going to read chapter 3 today. Frog and Toad Are Friends. In chapter 3, it's called A Lost Button. Toad and Frog went for a long walk. They walked across a large meadow. They walked in the woods. They walked along the river, and at last they went back home to Toad's house. "Oh, drat," said Toad. "Not only do my feet hurt, but I have lost one of the buttons on my jacket." Oh no, Toad must be really upset. "Don't worry," said Frog. "We will go back to all the places where we walked, and we will soon find your button." They walked back to the large meadow, and they began to look for the button in the tall grass. "Here is your button," cried Frog. "That is not my button," said Toad. "My button is black." Let me read that again. Good readers have to pay close attention. "That button is black. My button was white." Toad put the black button in his pocket. A sparrow flew down. "Excuse me," said the sparrow. "Did you lose a button?" "I found one." "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button has 2 holes. My button had 4 holes." Toad put the button with 2 holes in his pocket. They went back to the woods and looked on the dark paths. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," cried Toad. Let me read that again. He cried it. "That is not my button," cried Toad. "That button is small. My button was big." Toad put the small button in his pocket. A raccoon came out from behind a tree. "I heard that you were looking for a button," he said. "Here is one that I just found." "That's not my button," wailed Toad. "That button is square. My button was round." Toad put the square button in his pocket. Frog and Toad went back to the river. They looked for the button in the mud. "Here's your button," said Frog. "That's not my button," shouted Toad. "That button is thin. My button was thick." Pause for a second. It seems like Toad is getting really upset. This is reminding me of the time where Frog was trying to get Toad to wake up from his hibernation, and Toad kept saying, "No, I'm too tired. It's not time to wake up yet." It's making me think that Toad might be a little dramatic or emotional. And Frog, again, is helping Toad solve a problem, just like he did in a story and just like he did in spring. Makes me think that Frog is helpful. He does a lot of things to help Toad. That's what I see him doing. Toad put the thin button in his pocket. He was very angry. He jumped up and down and screamed, "The whole world is covered with buttons, and not one of them is mine." Toad ran home and slammed the door. There on the floor, he saw his white, 4-holed, big, round, thick button. "Oh," said Toad, "it was here all this time. What a lot of trouble I've made for Frog." See, there he is again, Toad being dramatic. Toad took all of the buttons out of his pocket. He took his sewing box down from the shelf. Toad sewed the buttons all over his jacket. The next day, Toad gave his jacket to Frog. Frog thought it was beautiful. He put it on and jumped for joy. None of the buttons fell off. Toad had sewed them on very well. That is the end of this chapter. I'm getting a new idea about Toad, though. At first, we said he was dramatic, and I still think he's pretty dramatic, but I'm thinking of a new word. Look at what he did for Frog. He got an idea, and he thought to put all of these buttons onto a jacket and give it to Toad. That makes me think of two words. It makes me think that Toad is caring because he did something for Frog. And it also makes me think that Toad is creative. That was a really creative idea to think of to put all the buttons on the jacket. What do you think? Are you going to write about Frog or Toad today? Pick one, and then in your writing assignment, write what is one word that describes that person. Do you want to say that Frog is helpful? Or that Frog is caring? Or that Frog is calm? Because I noticed in all these stories, Frog doesn't get upset. Frog stays calm. Or are you going to write about Toad? Maybe you could say that Toad is dramatic, but you could also say that Toad is caring. You could say Toad is creative. You could say Toad is emotional. There's so many words you could say to describe both of them. You don't have to use one of the words that I picked, but you can if you want. Think about one word that you want to use to describe one of these characters and write. Why do you think that? I think Toad is, one reason is, another reason is, for example, that's why I think Toad is, tell me what you think. Or you could say it for Frog. I think Frog is, and then give me all your reasons and wrap it up with, that's why I think Frog is, Can't wait to see what you write. Make sure you press the gray turn in button after you listen to this story so I know you listened to it. See you tomorrow.